Hello, and welcome back to the Becoming Ageless podcast, where we have conversations about whole health for naturally increasing health span and decreasing biological age. I'm your host, Robynn Fredericks, and I believe in living and being ageless. When talking health span, we are talking about individuals being able to age in good health without chronic diseases or disability. And if you follow this podcast, you know that I strongly believe that in achieving a long health span is like putting together a complicated jigsaw puzzle. There's so many pieces with various shapes and colors. And some of those pieces are obvious to the final picture, while others are not so obvious, but nonetheless, still important to the overall image. It's my goal that we uncover them all to help you to put together the beautiful masterpiece of a long, healthy, vibrant, and passionate life. Today, we're talking about sleep. The National Institute of Medicine cites that healthy sleep quality was associated with a reduced risk of premature end of health span, suggesting healthy sleep behavior may extend health span. And according to the Institute of Medicine, 50 to 70 million US adults have a sleeping disorder, with 40% of those people aged 40 to 59, which is our main listener group, reporting that they are getting less than the recommended amounts of sleep, which is about 7 to 9 hours. 75 to 90% of insomnia sufferers have an increased risk of medical disorders, including heart disease, stroke, asthma, COPD, cancer, arthritis, depression, chronic kidney disease, diabetes, and even premature skin aging. 9 million Americans take prescription drugs to help them fall asleep, with China being the most sleep medicated country in the world. The frequency of sleep med, the use is associated with higher mortality rate and a 35% higher chance of developing cancer. Sleep deprivation is a chronic issue in our world, perhaps more now than ever before. And obviously, from the statistics that I just mentioned, it affects our health and our well being. So, my hope today is that we can delve into this subject and talk about the things that we can do. My guest today is Dr. Narusha Kumaran. She is the founder and medical director of the Elemental Health Clinic in London. She's a practicing NHS and private GP certified lifestyle medicine physician and functional medicine specialist. She's passionate about holistic, integrative, and patient-centered care, and she has specialties in gut health, Hashimoto's thyroiditis, and bioenergetics. That's a mouthful. Dr. Kumaran has faced both her own challenges of burnout and digestive issues, as well as her own daughter at just 5 weeks old, suffering from severe eczema and multiple food allergies, which took her down the road of searching for root causes, but ultimately led her to a functional medicine practice. We'll definitely be talking more about that. But before we do, let me bring on our guest for the day. Welcome to the show, Narusha. It's so good to see you all the way from London.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Absolutely. We're happy to have you here because I'm really hoping that you are going to be able to provide some really good information and maybe people can actually get a good night's sleep tonight. But before we get started, everybody knows that we have to ask our themed question. We all want to know, what are you doing in your own life to bring about a greater health span and living agelessly?
Well, there's a lot of things I'm trying to do at the moment, but the main thing that I prioritize every morning is doing yoga practice and meditation. So I try my best to start every day with at least 10 minutes of yoga, because I think it's really important to stay flexible, stay supple, kind of ground me and focus on kind of setting positive intentions for the rest of the day. So yeah, that's what I'm doing every day.
That's great.
But obviously try to do lots of other things as well.
Yeah. Now, your daughter, we're going to talk about her in just a second, but I have to know, is she doing yoga with you? Because I know little ones like to, do like a monkey version of yoga and climb on mommy's back and everything while you're trying to do it.
Yeah, so she loves to come and just interfere. So it can be challenging to do it when she's around. So
That has to like create more brain cells in you though, of how do I figure this one out?
exactly.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So speaking of your little girl, I know that you went through a lot when you were in med school trying to juggle a lot of different balls and everything, and then ended up running into some allergies with her. Can you kind of touch on that just a little bit? I don't want to take up too much time, but kind of explain to people what was going on and how did that take you from regular general practice into functional medicine?
Yeah, so my daughter was born during the first pandemic. During the pandemic in the first lockdown. And she had really severe eczema to the extent that we had to take her to hospital. And then we subsequently found out that the driver for her eczema was 13 food allergies. So quite a lot. And I was quite surprised really because we don't have a family history of food allergies. So I was really trying to understand the root cause for why she developed these food allergies. And then I started digging deeper to try and help her. And I came across functional medicine and I'd known about it vaguely before. I'd always been passionate about lifestyle medicine. I was already qualified as a certified lifestyle medicine physician. But then looking deeper into helping her, I discovered functional medicine. And as soon as I studied functional medicine, my mind was blown. I trained with the IFM. And that was kind of a pivotal point for me to then kind of change the way I decided, wanted to practice medicine going forward. And so whilst I've always been a generalist, I've always been into helping people holistically, this was again, it was kind of giving me a lot more tools in my toolkit to be able to help people in a much more holistic way than before. And then utilizing the tools of functional medicine and kind of addressing my daughter's gut health, immune system, and then just optimizing her nutrients, we've managed to reduce the total number of her food allergies from 13 to 6.
Oh, wow.
And we've also achieved clear skin. So, we were using steroid creams on weeks on end, and also, a protopic, which is quite a strong cream for a baby. And now it's been over a year now. I haven't had to use any kind of formal kind of treatments on her skin. So, yeah.
Okay, I have to ask a really quick question about that, deviating a little bit. So you did lifestyle medicine, and then you said that you discovered functional medicine. What is the difference for our listeners who don't know?
So, lifestyle medicine is very much focused on the key lifestyle principles. So, nutrition, exercise, sleep, stress management, community relationships, and reducing harmful substances. Those are the kind of 6 key pillars that lifestyle medicine is focused on. And that's excellent because, as you know, we know that, 70 to 80% of chronic diseases are lifestyle related or have a lifestyle component. And so, improving your lifestyle will certainly help with chronic health conditions. And for me, that was amazing, learning the evidence about all the lifestyle changes. It wasn't really taught to us in medical school. So it was excellent for me to then certify in that after. However, when I discovered functional medicine really does go deeper, I would say, in my opinion. We look further into, a patient's timeline to understand their root causes of why they've become unwell. And then also really assessing every single system in the body and looking at the biology and the physiology and kind of looking at the biochemistry. So really kind of going deeper into understanding what exactly is happening in that person's body. So there are many more kind of approaches that you can use to help a patient using functional medicine in addition to lifestyle medicine. But functional medicine incorporates lifestyle medicine as at its core, essentially. So you can't have functional medicine without lifestyle medicine.
Of course. Of course. I love that explanation. And, I heard somebody put it once, just referring to regular medicine versus functional medicine. Regular medicine, there's definitely a time and a place for it. But, dealing with chronic issues, saying somebody with like blood pressure, it's equivalent to if you give somebody a blood pressure medicine, you bring the blood pressure down, but you're not healing the body, you're not fixing the problem. And when they come off of that blood pressure medicine, it just goes back up, not to mention all of the other side effects. But coming at it with a functional medicine approach, and you're kind of going upstream a little bit, trying to find out what's causing that, you can actually help that person to overcome it.
Absolutely. That's the aim, really. It's about creating remission as opposed to suppression of symptoms.
And we're going to kind of look at that and use that same approach for sleep, hopefully.
Yes.
That's awesome. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about sleep. We all know it's important to get a good night's sleep. We've learned that since we were little, and we feel a little bit groggy if we don't get our sleep. But most of us, power through it. What is sleep really? What's going on? Why do we really need it? So let's give a sleep 101 talk on what is sleep.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, I think until I'd really studied this deeper, again, sleep, we touched upon it during my medical school training, but it's really since I've studied lifestyle and functional medicine that I've really delved deeper into sleep and the importance of sleep. And, sleep is just so fundamental for kind of every single system of our body. There are so many kind of physiological processes that are happening whilst we sleep that are really important for our longevity and our health span. So, we kind of know that obviously we need sleep to feel refreshed and obviously less tired during the day. But actually also when we sleep, we're, repairing our muscles, our tissues and our organs. We're also mopping up the free radicals. So the kind of damaging byproducts are produced by our cells. And detoxification is also happening when we sleep. So we know, especially in our brains, that you know the cells in our brains can produce toxins, and that can accumulate during the day. And it's at sleep that our brains, so the lymphatic system in our brains, able to mop away all these damaging toxins and molecules that have built up. And actually, there was a really interesting study that I read in the journal Science about these mice that were injected with beta amyloid protein, which is the protein that accumulates in patients with Alzheimer's disease. And they found that actually that when the mice were asleep, they cleared the beta amyloid protein much faster than if they were awake. So again, it's really important for things like neurodegenerative conditions and cognitive health problems. So, clearing away those toxins and those molecules that can be harmful to the brain is really important during sleep. So, there's all of that. And then obviously sleep is really important for just kind of memory, and learning and problem solving, concentration, focus. And then if we're looking at it from like a systems biology approach, if we're looking at kind of how all the systems function, we know that, gut health is very, the microbiome really benefits from sleep. Our immune system. So we know that sleep deprivation has been linked with an inability to produce antibodies or cytokines that are important for the immune response. And actually, if you're not sleeping, when you're unwell, it could prolong the illness, or it can inhibit the kind of recovery of the illness. And we also know that, say, for example, you're getting a vaccination, sleep is really important to build up those antibodies to that vaccine. So, it's really important for the immune system. Then emotional health and mental health. So, obviously we know that sleep can affect our mood. Just, a day or two of lack of sleep for me, I feel really stressed or on edge, and, anxiety levels go up. And, we know that sleep is really important for our emotional health. And there's certain areas of our brain, particularly to do with our emotional health, such as the amygdala, hippocampus, that are activated when we sleep to help regulate that response. And then we also know kind of metabolically, so for things like cardiovascular health and weight management, that sleep is, again, really crucial. So, I can go into this in a bit more detail. So you may have heard of the hormones ghrelin and leptin. So ghrelin is responsible for kind of telling us that we're hungry. So it kind of tells us that we need to eat, essentially.
So ghrelin is like gurring, like when your
Yeah.
stomach starts gurring. So
Yeah,
that's actually a hormone.
yes. Exactly. And then leptin is the one that's telling you you're full. So once you've eaten, then the leptin goes up and it tells you, okay, I'm full now, I need to stop eating. And actually, a lack of sleep can cause the ghrelin levels to go up. So it can make you feel more hungry. And the leptin levels go down. So actually, you're not able to recognize as well when you're full anymore. So you tend to overeat. And obviously, that can then put you at risk of gaining weight. And then, obviously sleep is also connected to other things like high blood pressure and raised cortisol, which is obviously the stress hormone. And that, raising cortisol can cause all sorts of problems in our body. And I think, we can talk about that in a bit more detail. But also, in terms of kind of blood sugar metabolism, sleep is really important as well. So, insulin, which is the hormone that is important for enabling our cells to be able to utilize the glucose, the sugars that we're eating. If in order to help our cells utilize insulin, again, sleep really important. So it's fascinating, isn't it? It's literally every single system of our body that benefits from sleep.
Right. And it's like we are almost in this comatose state. We don't think there's really anything happening. And, in all reality, there's more happening internally when we're sleeping than really kind of when we're awake that we don't even know about.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
I love the idea, when I first started getting into health, that we learned that the body has that energy system. And during the day, providing us with energy to do the task that we have to do, whether it's, you know, sitting on a computer and having a podcast or running from a lion, like originally we were designed to do, all of that energy's got to be available. And so it's kind of like the same thing when you get sick and the doctor says, you need to sleep. Rest is what you need right now. It's because our bodies can't repair
Yes,
if we're not giving it that rest cycle.
absolutely.
Yeah. And there's so much. So you touched on this, and I am blown away. I'm going to be so excited just to see where research goes with it, with the glymphatic system. And the glymphatic system, y'all, is really kind of the lymphatic system of the brain. And it is really fascinating, like you said, with the mice, that mouse study. And, there's so much talk about with COVID increasing the damage in the brain. We need our sleep, y'all. We need our sleep, and we need to let that brain do its detoxifying. And I know we're going to get into it a little bit more about when it happens, but let's talk a little bit about what the different stages of sleep are.
Yeah. So when we're sleeping, we have sleep cycles. So we go through a cycle of sleep every 70 to kind of 120 minutes. So every kind of a little bit longer than an hour to 2 hours. So that's a sleep cycle. So you typically go through kind of 4 sleep cycles. And in each cycle, there's 4 stages. So the first stage is kind of where we're drowsy, we're falling asleep, our heart rate starts to slow down, our brain waves slow down, and our eye movements slow down. So this can typically last about 7 to 10 minutes in most people. We then move into light sleep stage, where again, this is where our body temperature falls. So, or again, we could talk about this in a bit more detail, but core body temperature dropping is actually a really important mechanism to get us to fall asleep. And it's during that light sleep phase that our core body temperature falls. And then again, our heart rate slows down even more and our muscles start to relax. And then we enter stage 3, which is deep sleep. And so this is really important. So deep sleep is really important for restoration, essentially. So our cells and our muscles and our tissues all repair during the deep sleep phase. And also it's really important for that energy conservation to happen. And then the last stage is called REM sleep, or rapid eye movement sleep. And so this is the stage where, so it's typically characterized by rapid eye movements, and that's why it's called REM sleep. And, if you track your sleep, you'll notice that your heart rate starts to increase during this period. And this is also characterized by by dreaming. So it's usually in the REM sleep stage that we dream. But this stage is also really important for learning and memory formations. So each kind of stage has an important role. And then every kind of, like I said, every kind of 1-ish to 2 hours, we repeat that same cycle. So it is normal to wake up as well when you re-enter into stage one, but you're not aware of that you're waking up. But if you were to track your sleep, you'll realize you can see you wake up very briefly and then you go back to sleep again. Yeah.
Yeah, I wear a Whoop, and when I first started wearing it and looking and tracking my sleep, I'm like, man, I was awake a lot. You have no idea. I mean, and even the light sleep. Um, I've with a lot of research, with my clients, even with myself, I was like really looking into how much REM sleep, how much deep wave sleep are we really needing? What is considered to be beneficial? Do you have those numbers? Because I think I have them here somewhere.
So ideally we should be aiming for at least kind of 2-ish hours of REM sleep and 2-ish hours of deep sleep when you
Okay.
think about, when you consider an average adult should be sleeping for about 7 to 8 hours roughly. Ideally, at least half of that should be, well, more than half should
Combination.
be deep and REM sleep, because those are like I said, those are the two critical stages of sleep that are really important for um of optimal function.
Right. And that's divided into however many cycles we go through.
However many
So
cycles.
2 hours divided by
Yeah,
4 cycles. That's
exactly.
so interesting. It's so interesting to me. And I love how, like with REM sleep, how our body actually paralyzes us because it thinks that we're actually awake and it's keeping you from actually hurting yourself or somebody else.
Definitely,
Uh,
definitely.
Now, what about as we age? Do we need more or less sleep? Because I hear so much controversy on this.
So actually, we need the same amount of sleep as we
Okay.
age. Yeah, so we should still be aiming to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep as we're getting older. It's harder to fall asleep as we get older, and it's harder to stay asleep because of, again, our circadian rhythms become less sensitive. So our circadian rhythm is our kind of biological clock. So that kind of tells us when we should be falling asleep and when we should be waking up. And as we get older, due to various factors, genetics and environmental factors, we become less responsive to that biological clock. And that's why it's harder to fall asleep. But also hormones also have an impact. So, when you're going through menopause or perimenopause, the lack of estrogen or the fall in estrogen can disrupt sleep as well, because sleep is so estrogen is very important for the metabolism of neurotransmitters, and obviously melatonin is a neurotransmitter and a hormone, and estrogen's involved in the production of melatonin. And so as we're going through perimenopause or menopause and the estrogen levels start dropping, then melatonin production becomes affected. And melatonin is that hormone that's telling our bodies to go to sleep. So that's produced in the brain, and it's signaling our bodies that it's time to go to sleep.
Right. Now, when our bodies start getting cooler at night, that is basically the signal for our brains to start releasing melatonin. Is that correct?
Yes, that's right. So ideally, we want our core body temperature to drop. So in Celsius, I know it's about 1 degree Celsius. I think in Fahrenheit it's about 3. So we want that core body temperature to drop so that it tells the kind of temperature centers of our brain are very close to where the melatonin centers are. And the temperature dropping signals so it's the suprachiasmatic nucleus that releases melatonin. And the temperature dropping signals that area of the brain to release melatonin. So that's really important. But also another key mechanism that drives that is darkness. So reducing light exposure,
Hmm.
again, signals our brain to produce melatonin.
Right. Now, I know this might seem, like a crazy question when we're talking about, people who are not getting enough sleep, but can somebody get too much sleep?
Yes, so you can get too much sleep, and again, that may also have negative health consequences. So, particularly if you have too much sleep, you'll feel more groggy and actually more fatigued.
Hmm.
So, ideally, you do want to be sticking to the ideal kind of windows of sleep if possible.
Right.
Yeah, so aiming for about 7 to 8 hours of sleep is really ideal, but then that's not the same as so time slept is not the same as sleep opportunity. So we want to be giving our bodies an opportunity to sleep for at least 8 to 9 hours at night. So, when we're going to bed, we should be thinking, okay, I want to set, if you are setting an alarm for at least 8 hours time, but then it's only if you allow yourself that opportunity will you then ensure you get at least 7 hours sleep, if that makes sense.
Right.
So yeah, so you want to be targeting about 7 to 8 hours of actual time slept, and then giving yourself a bigger opportunity to sleep so that you ensure you get those hours. So
Gotcha.
yeah, so like, I always do this where I think, okay, I'll go to bed at 11:30 and I'll set my alarm for like 7 hours time, and then I would have 7 hours sleep. But that's not the case. Inevitably, you're going to have much less sleep than seven
Yeah.
hours. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I know I do, especially since, I went into menopause. Yeah, I need at least 8.5 to 9 hours in bed to get 7 to 8 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
It happens to us all, you guys. Is there what things are we doing? What can hurt our sleep?
Yeah, there's so many things. I mean, again, sleep is very sensitive to kind of so many factors. So, we talked about kind of stress. So, we know that sleep can cause stress, but at the same time, stress and kind of emotional issues can actually disrupt sleep. Stimulants such as caffeine and also alcohol, though alcohol can make you feel drowsy, but it's not giving you that genuine quality of sleep that you need. It's kind of giving your brain like a false sense of drowsiness, and you're not actually entering sleep cycles. So you're not actually getting the restorative sleep. And obviously, we know that caffeine can keep you awake. And so you don't want to be drinking caffeine ideally after midday, but definitely not after 2 p.m. And then, we talked about light exposure. So this is becoming a real big issue for us, especially in, 21st century, where we're kind of surrounded by blue light from like LED light bulbs and our devices. And, it's challenging to avoid blue light nowadays. So, and we know that there are receptors in our eyes that are sensitive to blue light that can signal our melatonin to not be released. So essentially, it suppresses melatonin release.
Mm.
And so, it's kind of really disrupting that whole sleep cycle when you think about it.
Yeah.
And, thankfully now you can get kind of blue light blocking glasses, or you can get light bulbs that don't emit blue light, or you can use candles instead. So there are ways around it. It's just trying to be mindful of that exposure. And
Yeah.
then other things like obviously we talked about menopause that can affect our sleep. And then foods as well. So again, the timing of when we eat is really important. What types of foods we're eating before we go to bed, how soon before we go to bed is our last meal. Again, this is all really important for how we sleep and
Right.
the quality of sleep that we
Okay.
then get at night.
So let's talk about that. What kind of food and what time of day should we be thinking of dinner?
Yeah, so I've looked into this a lot, and there's no kind of set rule to say there's one particular diet or kind of eating pattern you should follow. There's a lot of kind of evidence behind the Mediterranean diet, that's kind of generally a very healthy diet to follow for many health conditions. But ideally, what we should be trying to kind of the general principles are that we shouldn't be eating too late at night. So we should be leaving at least 2 hours, but ideally 4 hours between our dinner and then our going to bed time. And then we want to be eating meals that are going to sustain us during the night. So we don't want to be eating kind of carb heavy meals that will kind of stimulate a glucose spike. And with the glucose spike comes an insulin response and a cortisol response. So again, we know that cortisol is a stress hormone, and actually cortisol goes up in the mornings when we're telling our bodies to wake up. It's the cortisol that's telling our bodies to wake up. So cortisol going up will essentially disrupt sleep. And then, so ideally, instead of kind of refined carbohydrates, we want to be thinking about longer acting carbohydrates like whole grain carbohydrates. And ideally,
quinoa, amaranth.
yeah,
Those are my favorite guys.
Yeah. So like whole grain rice, quinoa, like you said, amaranth, all like excellent sources of kind of whole grains. And then healthy fats, again, is really important. So combining a carbohydrate with a healthy fat will ensure that that blood glucose is released very slowly. So healthy fats like oily fish, extra virgin olive oil, avocados, nuts and seeds. Again, those are really important to incorporate in your kind of evening meal. You want to avoid high protein meals ideally, because protein can take a long time to digest. So, if we are eating kind of meal that may be heavy in red meat, for example, that may sit in the stomach for longer. And again, that kind of digestive process, if that's still ongoing, then that can disrupt the sleep process. And again, things like spicy foods, we want to try and avoid those in our evening meals as well, because we know that acid reflux and heartburn, that can be a major trigger for sleep disruptions.
Now, what about people who they're not used to stopping their eating early on, and they feel like, oh, I cannot go that long without having a snack or having something, and they're afraid they're going to wake up in the middle of the night and be starving. Is there something that they could snack on before bed that's not going to wake them up?
Yeah, so then you would be thinking about a healthier fat source, ideally. So either like an avocado, some nuts or seeds before bedtime. Gradually our bodies do get used to it. So I was exactly like that. I felt like I couldn't sleep because, if I was, say, hungry at night, obviously it's difficult to fall asleep if you're hungry. So then definitely I'd advocate getting up and eating something, because you don't want that hunger to then keep you awake. But you will get used to it. Your body does get used to kind of eating earlier. But also you need to be thinking, we completely appreciate that diet and nutrition has to be fully personalized. So again, how your body is responding to foods is going to be different to someone else. And so the advice I give is very generic, and ideally, we do need to be trying to adopt a personalized approach when it comes to diet and nutrition.
Right.
And if you are the type of person that finds that you do need to have a snack late at night, or you do kind of wake up hungry, then I'd strongly recommend looking into kind of blood sugar metabolism, maybe using like a continuous glucose monitor to actually monitor the blood sugar levels during the night, because it could be that there is a problem with blood sugar metabolism, and that's why the sleep is being disrupted.
Right. No, like with intermittent fasting or time restricted eating, of course, the recommendation with people starting out is to aim for 10 to 12 hours. Um,
Absolutely.
Doing that, is that going to help the body to transition into a better insulin levels, the better, sensitivity of the cells to bring that insulin in? How is intermittent fasting helping us with sleep?
Yeah, so intermittent fasting is really there's so many benefits to intermittent fasting. And certainly the impact on sleep is, really interesting. So with intermittent fasting, you're training your body to respond to our natural circadian rhythm. So just like how in our brain there's circadian rhythm that's telling us when to go to sleep and when to wake up, all of our cells in our body have a circadian rhythm. Our gut microbiome has a circadian rhythm. And just how kind of our brains need to rest, our microbes also need to rest in our stomach. And by doing this process of intermittent fasting, we're enabling our gut microbes as well to repair and replenish during the night and clear away any toxins that they may have produced. And so overall, kind of eating in that kind of ideally, if you should start off with like a smaller window, like
Right.
12 hours, and then gradually increase that kind of fasting period if possible to kind of 14 and then 16 if you can. It's just really helpful to reset the entire body's circadian rhythm. And when all your circadian rhythms are kind of functioning optimally, then you'll find that the systems regulate, your sleep improves, and it's just really beneficial for overall well-being.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot more kind of evidence coming out about intermittent fasting, and I certainly found that personally it's been so beneficial for me as well.
Yeah, absolutely. For me too. And I mean, again, wearing a health tracker is something like I will notice, my sleep improves, my restore improves when I do a longer, fasting window. And it's interesting. And I don't know if you remember, I mean, you're probably too young to remember, back in the 90s and even early the 2000s, we were always taught that we need to graze all day long. Graze, 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 graze. And you get the least little bit hungry, you start putting food in your mouth and you don't want those muscles to get hungry. And, especially my age group, that's what we grew up with. And to now try to come back and tell people, oh, now we know we're eating too much and we're eating too often and we need to pull back. It's hard for
It
them
is.
because they've, the habits have been set up and people have been doing this for, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Do you have any recommendations on how to start doing that? How to start pulling back and not eating all of those snacks?
Yeah, so
I know it's
it's
completely off topic, you guys. I'm sorry.
no, 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 I think what I found, what I recommend to patients and what I found personally as well is really cutting out kind of the refined carbohydrates and the kind of sugars in my meals. So, avoiding things like desserts and trying to have meals that are better for blood sugar balance really does help sustain you for a longer period of time. And then it avoids that need of snacking. So, just one simple thing that I did is started introducing almond nuts and almond butter into my breakfast. So I did kind of as an experiment, I did a continuous glucose monitoring on myself. And I always found that after breakfast, I would get hungry 2 hours later. And I never really understood why, because I was obviously having kind of porridge, and porridge is meant to be healthy.
Right?
Yeah, so when I did the continuous blood glucose monitoring, I realized that actually the oats in porridge were putting my blood sugar up. And it was that sudden decline in blood sugar, kind of 2 to 3 hours later, that then triggered my hunger response and made me feel hungry.
Yeah.
I started adding almond nut butter to my porridge, and then suddenly my blood sugar was balanced because there was a healthy fat source that was slowing down that release of blood glucose. And so it's just really about trying to understand nutrition in a bit and personalizing it to you, and to see if there are meals that spike your blood sugar.
Right.
And then, yeah, trying to track and see how your body responds to different types of foods.
Right.
But yeah, better blood sugar balancing meals is what I would highly kind of recommend.
Yeah. And all of that is going to kind of go together because I mean, it's, going back to our bodies being a system, I am joking around about, eating the meals in the morning or grazing or versus not grazing and fasting in between meals. That's usually how I get people to fast is let's start fasting between meals before we even worry about nighttime. Just fast that 2 to 3 hours. Um, it
And
all
again,
adds
that's
up.
really important for digestion
Yeah.
because you need that window, that 2 to 3 hours for that digestive process to work. Because, that
Yeah.
whole digestive system takes about 2 to 3 hours for one kind of complete system to go through. So you don't want to be overloading that either.
Right. And I mean, and it does just start adding up to what the day's end is going to be. And for the proper release of cortisol to melatonin, your body, like you said, it can't be in the throes of digestion and expect melatonin to be released. I mean, digestion is a lot of energy, and energy is heat. So
Yeah.
your body can't start cooling down, and it starts cooling down in the trunk area. That's
Yes.
like where it starts trying to cool down and starts spreading that heat out.
Mm.
So, yeah, we want to be done with that food.
Yes.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Absolutely. Um, because so switching gears just a little bit, you've been talking a lot about circadian rhythm. Can you kind of touch just a little bit about what is circadian rhythm? How do we balance the circadian rhythm? What does it have to do with our sleep? Help us with this. I know it's a really hot topic right now.
Yeah, it's definitely a hot topic. I think there's been so much more research into this recently. And yeah, I think that we know now that, as I said earlier, every single system of the body is relied upon an optimal functioning circadian rhythm. And we can really help our circadian rhythms function coherently by getting our sleep system sorted out. So, kind of sleep is kind of the center of our circadian rhythm. So, obviously, circadian rhythms are biological clock. And so, with a typical circadian rhythm, what you would see is in the mornings, our cortisol levels rise and they usually peak. So, they start to rise around kind of 3, 4 a.m. and then they gradually start rising. And then usually by 9 a.m. it peaks. And then during the day, it kind of declines gradually and your melatonin starts to rise. So that's kind of the optimal circadian rhythm. So where your cortisol rises in the morning and then declines for the rest of the day, and then the melatonin rises at night, and then that will then gradually decline overnight. But, we spoke about all the different things that can disrupt our circadian rhythm. And so it's being really mindful about what you're doing, not just at night before you go to bed, but also in the morning as soon as you wake up. Because to get that cortisol curve going in the morning, you need to be thinking about early morning light exposure. So ideally, kind of first thing when you wake up, either you really do want to be kind of stepping outside and absorbing that sunlight and really starting the day with at least 5 minutes of sunlight exposure, and that really does help set that circadian rhythm off, because it really is a 24-hour cycle. So it's a continuous 24-hour cycle that's kind of going on loop. And then thinking also about when you're exercising as well is really important. So exercising during the first half of the day is better for optimal circadian function, because of the connection between exercise and kind of cortisol release. So ideally, we know that obviously exercise is very beneficial, but at the same time, it can be a good stressor on the body. So ideally, we do want to be doing kind of more intense like cardio or strength training in the first half of the day, but then at night time, thinking about more gentle exercises like stretching or yoga or, yoga nidra, that kind of thing to really
Yeah.
help calm the body
Maybe going
down.
for a walk after dinner.
Or walk after dinner,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And then, as we mentioned, light exposure is really important so the evening light exposure as well. So ideally, you want to be watching the sun go down, or you want to be seeing that transition from light to dark, and you want to then avoid kind of blue light exposure in the evenings where possible. And then meal timing, are really important for circadian rhythm. So yeah, so many things that can help, that we can do to boost our circadian rhythms.
Right. You had mentioned when we were talking once before something about um the different type of people we are. And I found I'm one of the people that follows the sun, more or less. And that made me a bear. Was that a bear?
So that's our sleep chronotype.
Okay.
So yeah, so that's like so there's been kind of some research to show that there are four different kind of chronotypes that we can all fall into. And depending on our chronotype, we can either be an early riser, so we can be a person that ideally wakes up early and then goes to bed early, and that, like you said, a bear, they follow the sunlight. Or you could be a night person where you prefer to stay awake at night and you get most of your work done at night. And again, that can be normal for you. So that's kind of how your genetics are made up.
Right.
And then you'd be considered a wolf. So lions are people that really like to wake up like super early and get everything done in the morning. And
Let
then
me be a
there's
lion.
also one, and then there's one other chronotype, dolphins, and kind of genetically, these people struggle to fall asleep. So, there could be a genetic component to sleep difficulties as well. So, yeah, depending on what your kind of chronotype is, you can then kind of work out what your daily routine should be, because obviously if you're a wolf and you like to be awake at night and trying to tell you to then go to bed earlier, that's just simply not going to work for you and
Right.
not be optimal for you. So you can then shift your whole kind of daily routine and try and optimize your biological clock by doing things at times that are better suited for you.
So basically, it's almost like you're saying, the circadian rhythm we know is a 24-hour clock. And my clock might run from, you know, 6 o'clock in the morning to, 9 o'clock at night where I'm going to bed. But somebody else's may not, their circadian or their cortisol doesn't really kick into gear until 8 a.m. and they can run until midnight or so. And neither one of
Yeah,
us is wrong. It's just that we need to follow that clock
exactly.
consistently and not like be jumping all over the map.
Exactly, exactly. Yes. And yeah, just try, I think you can do questionnaire. So the scientist that came up with this called Dr. Michael Breus. And if you just Google sleep chronotype, you can do a questionnaire online and you can figure out what your chronotype is. So yeah, just it would be an interesting thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So confession time, you guys know on the show, I always tell what's going on with me and things that I have learned through the years. Yeah. So I was always like one of those early morning people. And I could, basically woke up about 5:36, went to bed about 10, always very happy with that schedule. And then as I start getting into my 40s and I got married, I married one of these people who like to be up late at night and sleep late in the morning. I found my clock switching over to his. But interestingly, there's something inside of me that just wasn't, it was like something just felt amiss. It felt wrong, even though it's keeping that circadian going. And when I started learning about early morning sunlight and I started getting myself back into that early morning sunlight, Narusha, everything kind of just flip flopped for me. And now my body is so in tune with the sun. And it doesn't matter what my watch says. It doesn't matter what kind of alarm I set. As soon as dawn happens, I mean, just the barely breaking of light, I am like, I'm awake. And as soon as the sun starts going down, I mean, 8:45 at night, I'm kind of like, I'm just like, okay, I don't know if I like this anymore. But it's so interesting how our bodies, when we give the body a chance to figure out where it wants to be, it starts kind of guiding us and speaking to us. And I mean, my energy levels, my digestion, my sleep, everything has just started lining up for me. And it's so interesting. And I love this thing about chronotype. because, it means I can stop lecturing my husband how he needs to be getting up in the morning with me, because that's not going to be beneficial for him, because he is that nighttime person.
Exactly, exactly.
That is
And
it.
I really like how you said that all your systems have improved as a result of you optimizing your biological clock and your circadian rhythm. It really is a kind of multi-system rhythm that our bodies are going through. And, everything depends on it. Our mood, our digestion, our immune system, our stress response. It's all very much dependent on our circadian rhythm. So yeah.
So, do you have any advice um, for people who are like shift workers? Do they
Yeah,
need to
it's
stay on
very
that same clock even though it might be their day off, or can
yeah.
they flip flop?
So the recommended advice for shift workers is that ideally you should be staying on that same clock even on the days that you're not at work. Simply because the disruption to the circadian rhythm can be quite harmful to the body. And studies have shown that shift workers do have a higher rate of chronic diseases, and it's most likely to be due to the disruption in their circadian rhythms. And so the optimal kind of way, I know obviously if it's not possible, you know, of everyone's personal circumstances may mean that it's not possible to move out of shift work. So you can then try and optimize that by trying to stick to the same schedule where possible.
Yeah. And so like okay, back to a normal everyday average 9 to 5 kind of work schedule, or even shift workers, basically from what I've heard, I don't know if it's true or not, they say to not disrupt that circadian rhythm, you should keep that clock basically the same, with no more or no less of 30 minutes in any direction. So like if I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night, I might be able to stretch it to 9:30, but I shouldn't really try to stretch it and say, "Oh, it's Friday night. I'm going to stay up till midnight," and think tomorrow that it's going to be okay, right?
Yeah, and you'll feel it. If you just do that, you'll know the next day that it's not okay. And,
Yeah. I'll still
I
wake up
think
at dawn.
I think back to my university days and the kind of all the late nights, and I really struggled with insomnia when I was at uni. And there was so many factors that were kind of at play there, but certainly the late nights and the amount of stress that I was under at that time really did disrupt my circadian rhythm and my ability to fall asleep. So yeah, so just trying to stick to that same routine where possible. Like you said, you can deviate by maybe half an hour, 45 minutes, but where possible to try and stay to the same bedtime and waking up time would be the best for the body.
Right. And so if doing something like that, say you did miss it, and your body still wakes up at the same time anyway, or whatever reason you didn't get sleep that night, we're hearing a lot about sleep debt. Can you touch on that any at all?
Um, so kind of like the sleep deficit, do you mean?
Right. Right. Yeah. They're calling it,
Yeah,
like, I know here they're calling it like Whoop. Whoop calls it a sleep debt. So like
right.
you're supposed to be getting 8 hours of sleep and maybe you only got 5 hours of sleep. So now you've got 3 hours that your body's in debt of.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
I was reading an article, something about, there's people who, stay up pulling all nighter. Maybe they're, in college or working or whatever, and they don't sleep at all. And that is one kind of sleep debt. And then there's another where you're missing like 2 hours here, 3 hours there, 1 hour over here. But how it all adds up. But we can make up with it by like getting extra sleep one night or something, I think.
Yeah, so you can. So you can certainly try and compensate for a reduced amount of sleep from one night to another.
Yeah.
But again, it's not ideal because, we don't want to be oversleeping if
Right.
possible. So yeah, so again, if there are kind of obviously inevitable circumstances where you need to do an all-nighter or you do need to if you are going to have less sleep, just to try and catch up where you can. So daytime naps are fine, just not too late in the evening.
Yeah.
And yeah, just to try and catch up with that sleep where possible is going to be so beneficial for the body. And I certainly realized in myself that, say, for example, obviously I've got 2 young children and my sleep can be disrupted because of them. And I often do find I am catching up on the weekends, and
Yeah.
that does kind of reset things for me. Um, but obviously, that's not something I try and advocate. But where
But it's
possible, you just
reality.
need to, yeah, be
Yeah.
be real, really.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. During the intro, you guys, I talked a little bit about sleep meds, and I had asked Dr. Kumarin if she could kind of touch on this a little bit about sleep meds. Should we use them? Should we not use them? What do we do? So let's go into that a little bit because I know it is such a real issue here. Um,
Yeah.
so what
No,
are they doing? How are they helping or harming us?
so I think the kind of general consensus on sleep medications is now it's better to avoid it where possible, simply because, firstly, they're not actually giving us the sleep cycles that our body really needs. So they're kind of almost mimicking our brains into thinking or kind of going to sleep, kind of sedating us in our higher brains, but not actually stimulating the same sleep stages or the same sleep cycle. So we're not getting the REM sleep that we really do need
Mm.
for that kind of memory process. So often, after using sleeping tablets, you may find that the following morning you kind of feel like a bit of a hangover effect, or you feel quite groggy and you feel that you're more forgetful. And that's because you're losing that REM sleep during the night. And it's a similar process that happens with alcohol, actually. So again, it's you're pretty much losing your REM sleep after um, drinking alcohol. So even small amounts of alcohol can disrupt how much REM sleep you're getting. And there's been kind of studies to show actually that, really high usage of sleeping pills. So in back in 2012, there was a study in the BMJ where there was a team of researchers that found that using more than 132 sleeping pills a year puts you at an increased risk of death, which is kind of 5.3 times higher of an odds risk compared to no sleeping pill use at all. And even just taking 18 pills of sleeping tablets in 1 year put you at a 3.6 more likely risk of death compared to
Okay,
non-users.
say
It's
that one again.
astonishing.
Say that
Yeah,
18 pills.
18 pills.
So
18, yeah.
that
Just 1/8.
that's just a little over a half a month of
Yeah.
taking sleeping pills.
Yeah. It's because so using sleeping pills, like I said, doesn't really give you that replenishment of, it doesn't give you that restorative sleep that you need for the body to function. So you're more at risk of things like fatal car accidents. You're more at risk of fatal infections. And then generally, obviously, it can affect all the systems of our body. We talked about how sleep is so beneficial, and taking sleeping tablets is almost like, going through a stage of insomnia. You're kind of losing all of the benefits to the body that natural sleep provides. So ideally, obviously it's very difficult. Again, everyone's circumstances are different and everyone has insomnia for various different reasons. And sometimes you just need that sleeping pill just to get you through the night because, it's better than having nothing at all, no sleep at all. And I certainly found that was the case for me. Back when I was in uni, I was struggling really badly with insomnia, and I was using sleeping pills too because I just needed that night's sleep. I just couldn't
Right.
function without it. But at the same time, we know it's not providing natural sleep and it can be harmful to our health and it can be risking life-threatening diseases. So, ideally what we want is to be using it for very short periods of time where possible. My recommendation to my patients is not longer than 7 days, 14 days max. And then to always give yourself a break so you're not continuously using them. And ideally to think about other strategies to help improve your sleep. So now kind of the gold standard approach to sleep treatments is actually cognitive behavioral therapy.
Hmm.
So you can get cognitive behavioral therapy programs specifically designed for sleep. And that's now kind of, even in kind of conventional medicine, that's considered now first line treatment
Right.
for insomnia. But
Explain
this
that
is
a
where,
yeah, explain that a
yeah,
little bit. What are they doing in this? Because I know a lot of people might be like,
yeah. So cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, commonly known, is a really common psychological therapy. So it's often used in patients with anxiety and depression. But essentially, you're retraining your brain to break bad habits, essentially, and you're retraining your thought process. So you're really trying to teach your brain techniques to kind of stop that kind of the kind of anxieties around falling asleep, to break the bad sleeping patterns you may have developed. And it's really about retraining that brain to hopefully encourage you to fall asleep. And there have been lots of studies now to show that CBT can be very effective for
right,
improving not just kind of the ability to fall asleep, but also improving your quality of your sleep and the duration of your sleep as well.
okay. Okay, so if somebody's on sleeping pills and we know that they shouldn't be on them for longer than a couple of weeks if it's really, really, truly necessary.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, any kind of medication, you guys, you should always work with a practitioner in weaning off of them. Never, ever, ever do any kind of medication cold turkey. Always work with somebody. But is there any kind of suggestions that you have? I mean, cognitive therapy, um, other ways to help kind of, when the doctor is weaning them off, can they be doing some other things that are going to kind of help step up and take the place of that?
Yeah, so I would strongly recommend working with like a functional medicine practitioner to address the root causes of why that insomnia is happening in the first
Right.
place. So, really to understand what's happening in all the different systems of the body, what's happening with the cortisol system, maybe looking at cortisol salivary testing, looking at blood sugar balance. We spoke about how that can be a major disruptor of sleep, hormones. So, looking at how the different hormones are functioning in the body and looking for hormonal imbalances. So really trying to dig deeper and look for the root causes. And then we can also consider supplements. So again, in a conventional medicine setting, you may not be advised to use supplements, but we know in functional medicine and in nutrition, there are some supplements that can be very helpful to improve sleep quality and sleep duration. So, there are just like, a few examples like magnesium is really important. So we know that, a lot of people now are deficient in magnesium, and it's just so important for various different functions of the body, but particularly for sleep. It can help just get all your muscles relaxed and kind of calm the brain and help increase GABA, which is again another neurotransmitter that's really important for getting that sleepy state and that calm state to help you fall asleep. So yeah, magnesium's one of them. Even melatonin supplements can be considered. So obviously we spoke about melatonin and how that's a really important hormone that will help make you fall asleep. And actually, there are also melatonin-rich foods that you can eat. So things like tart cherries, goji berries, eggs, milk, fish, nuts. So, there are sources of melatonin that you can get from food.
Hmm.
And then there are other things like valerian root, lavender, passion flower. And then, we can even consider GABA itself as a supplement. So yeah, there are lots of different supplements we can consider. And then there's also kind of adaptogens. I don't know if you've probably heard of adaptogens,
Uh-huh.
but they're kind of herbs that will help calm the stress response. So something like L-theanine might be helpful
Right.
to to help calm the stress response. And again, it's about trying to tackle the root causes, but there are also supplements that you can
Yeah.
take that might help.
Yeah. No, those are great. So if a person's just having some bad sleep habits, we, talk about sleep hygiene a lot, or we hear that word a lot. What are some new rituals people can kind of pick up to help them to get some deeper sleep?
Yeah, so really just to start thinking about everything you're doing from the moment you wake up to the moment you go to sleep. So, we spoke about the early morning light exposure, and then trying to exercise. So exercise is really good, like in the first half of the day, because again, you're kind of utilizing a lot of that energy. So, naturally when you go to bed, you'd be more tired.
Yeah.
And then thinking about your evening routine. So really looking at removing the blue light sources, thinking about using blue light blocking glasses for 2 hours before you go to bed, and ideally the ones with the red lenses. And then, really trying to um, thinking about a calming ritual that you can do before you go to bed. So things like meditation or journaling. So journaling is really good, especially for someone who's like overthinking, or, there's a lot on your mind.
Yeah.
Being able to write that down before you go to bed can be really helpful to just offload those thoughts, because then you're not really, the idea is that if you can offload it, then you're not going to think about it when you're sleeping, and hopefully that won't then keep you awake.
Yeah.
And then, and then things like gratitude, um, thinking about the stretches, a warm bath, a warm drink, the lavender as like a aromatherapy, or using a diffuser with lavender. That'd be really nice. So, yeah. And then, just before, obviously trying to think about that circadian rhythm. So setting a regular wake up time and going to bed time, trying to avoid the late nights where possible.
Yeah. Um, yeah. I know you're going to get into some tips, or the 3 action points, but you mentioned hot bath. And you guys, I just have to throw this one in there. Studies have found that, of course, we know that, melatonin is really activating or being activated, and your body starts cooling off. And they have found that a hot bath between 104, 109 degrees Fahrenheit, I'm not sure what that is, Celsius, um, for 10 minutes. And you want to do it about an hour and a half to 1 hour before bed. So they say the ideal time is about 90 minutes. That is the perfect timing, according to some of these different studies, where that just like releases the melatonin and it helps to bring your body down. You don't want to do it too close to your bedtime, because that will heat your body up too much. And then the energy is going to go into trying to cool your body off. So, about 90 minutes before bed, take that hot bath, maybe add some lavender oil or something in there. And it works for me. I love it. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing. You can even throw some Epsom salt to get some magnesium in there.
Yeah.
And you will probably be snoozing before anybody. I think the study that I read showed people will usually fall asleep at least 10 minutes faster than normal.
That's really impressive.
It is. I
Really
mean, and
impressive.
you know what? It's not gonna hurt you.
Yeah.
So, you can't get too much more holistic. So, okay. So I'm really anxious to hear, because I know that you have a couple of really good ideas. What do you suggest, or what are your go-to tips that you're gonna leave people with today?
Yeah. So just on that topic of um temperature. So really being mindful of your room temperature as well. We
Yeah,
did talk about that, but
that's true.
just trying to keep that thermometer, or the thermostat at 18 degrees Celsius. I'm not sure Fahrenheit, but yes. And you can also trick your body into thinking that it can cool itself down by keeping your hands and feet warm.
Mm,
So actually, trying to wear some socks actually might help.
yeah.
Funnily enough, bring your cool body temperature down. But yeah, so really, like, I think action point number one is to be mindful of your environment. So make sure it's a dark, cool, quiet room, no noise, keep the light exposure nil, or kind of use candles, or you know, uh, blue light, light bulbs that don't have blue light, so kind of
Right.
red light bulbs, and create a sleep practice or a ritual that you can stick to every day. So make it realistic, because what you don't want is to then think that, we don't want to set this idea that you can't do something, or that there is a feeling of failure. We don't want that at all. So it's really about trying to build habits that you can stick to, that will be long lasting. And so, yeah, so, it could be anything that you want to do. So whether that's a bath, like you mentioned, Robin, or for me, I love to do stretches before I go to bed. So, I make it a habit to make sure I stretch my neck and my shoulder muscles before I go to bed. So yeah, so really think about what you can do as a ritual before you go to bed and think about your environment. And then I really want you to try considering doing some journaling because I think, that's a really easy thing that everyone can do. And if it's just like writing down a few things or even just writing down what you're grateful for that day, it can be just so offloading and yeah, really helpful.
Yeah,
And yeah, so that's two things. Do you want me to go on to a third?
sure.
Yeah. So actually on our website, we have a 5-day sleep challenge, which we created. So essentially it gives you 5 tips or 5 practices that you can do on a daily basis over a 5-day period, which you can download as a PDF. And the idea being that by the end of those 5 days, that you would have hopefully created some habits that will help improve your sleep quality. So yeah, that's a free challenge that we've got available on our website that you can go and download.
That's really helpful. And you guys, I've checked into that and I encourage you definitely go on and check it out. She's got a lot of points on her Instagram page. Narisha, where can people find you?
Yeah, so Instagram's probably the best place to find me. Obviously, you can email the clinic, or you can go to my clinic's website and contact me via there. But yeah, if you would like to, check out my work on social media or contact me via social media, definitely Instagram is the best way to make contact.
Awesome. Are there any final tips that you have for anybody?
Yeah, I mean, just to say that, it's um you're not alone if you're having any sleeping issues. It's such a common problem. And really to try and work with a practitioner who understands you and who can look at you holistically and assess all the systems of your body to really get to the root cause of why you've got that issue and not just take medication to suppress symptoms, because there are so many other methods of treatment. And the holistic approach has been shown to do wonders for all sorts of chronic health conditions, not just sleep problems. So really, yeah, just to think that there are other options available.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that, you guys. I mean, you all know, I believe wholeheartedly that you have to be your first health advocate before your doctor even is. It has to be you. And if you are going, you're seeing someone medically who honestly is not spending more than 5 minutes with you and throws a prescription at you before they've even realized what's going on with you, it might be time to find somebody else to talk to. And it's one of the things I love about functional practice. I mean, Nourish, I'm sure you can vouch for this. Functional practitioners, holistic practitioners generally will spend an hour with you in a consultation and really try to delve into what is happening and
Yeah,
try to get
often
to
it's
the
much
root of
longer
it.
than an hour. Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely. I mean, an hour is probably the minimum.
yeah,
Often it's a lot longer than that. So
yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's so rare today. But you know what? It's about our health span, living healthier longer, and it's worth it. And we need to like again be our best advocate. So, Narisha, thank you so much for being a part of the conversation today. We covered a lot of things. You guys, hopefully, you can go back and re listen to this. I know that she really shed a light on a much needed subject. And hopefully, you found something in here that might be able to help you to get a good night's sleep tonight. And you guys, if you have any questions about what we covered today, please visit our Instagram page at Becoming Ageless Podcast and drop any questions underneath the show poster. Either myself or I'll see if I can get Dr. Nusha Kumran to come back on and come on the page and help to answer some of the questions. And if you want to find out more about me, you can visit me on social media anywhere at Robynn Lynn, RBYNN. Lin. And I'll have all of Dr. Nurja Kumaran's details on our show page. So you guys, thank you so much for being with us. And I hope you'll join us here next time on Becoming Ageless, where we uncover new tips, tricks, actions, and science to increase your whole health span. Thanks, you guys.